"That rifle's broken, old man. We use it for parts now." The Marine sergeant handed 79-year-old Robert the Barrett M82 50 caliber rifle with barely concealed amusement. The weapon looked worn, the barrel supposedly shot out after thousands of training rounds. Robert had visited the Marine Scout Sniper training range near Quantico as part of a veterans outreach program. When he'd asked to examine the weapons, the instructors had decided to play a joke. Give the elderly veteran the worn-out Barrett, let him fumble with it, maybe take a picture for the bulletin board. The younger Marines gathered around, anticipating entertainment. Robert accepted the massive rifle, checked it with practiced efficiency, and asked where the ammunition was kept. The sergeant's grin widened. "You serious, Pops? You want to actually shoot that boat anchor?" If you believe skill has no age limit, comment "respect" below. Robert had been visiting military ranges for 15 years, ever since his wife passed, and he'd needed something to fill the empty days. He'd drive from his small house in Virginia to various bases, attending events that welcomed veterans. He was polite, quiet, and grateful for the hospitality. He'd watch training exercises, chat with young service members about their experiences, and occasionally share stories from his own service decades earlier. Most people assumed he'd been a regular Marine, perhaps infantry or logistics. Nobody asked for details. The instructors at this particular range had seen him arrive with a group of elderly veterans, all wearing various military caps and jackets denoting their service eras. Robert wore a simple windbreaker with no insignia. He looked like every other old man reliving past glory through proximity to current operations. The range that morning was set up for extreme long-range training. Targets placed at progressive distances: 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters, and finally 3,800 meters. The 3,800-meter target was theoretical, placed there more to teach students about the absolute limits of the 50 caliber round than with any expectation of hits. At that distance, dozens of variables affected the shot. Wind at multiple elevations, air temperature and density, the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, the declining velocity of the projectile. The math required computers. The skill required years of training. Even the best snipers in the Marine Corps rarely attempted shots beyond 3,000 meters in training, and almost never beyond that distance in actual operations. Robert studied the distant target through binoculars, then examined the Barrett. The rifle was indeed well worn. The barrel showed heat discoloration from extensive use. The bipod had been replaced multiple times, but as Robert ran his hands over the weapon, checking components with methodical precision, he found something the young Marines hadn't noticed. The barrel wasn't shot out. It was seasoned. Thousands of rounds through a quality barrel didn't ruin it. They settled it, created consistency. This rifle, properly maintained and with the right ammunition, could still shoot accurately. The Marines just didn't know how to use it anymore. Modern training emphasized technology and computers. This old Barrett predated much of that technology. It required understanding the rifle itself, reading conditions without digital aids, trusting experience over equations. Robert asked about ammunition. The sergeant, still treating this as entertainment, brought a box of standard 50 caliber rounds. "Here you go, sir. Want to shoot at the 1,000-meter? I'll spot for you." Robert shook his head. "The 3,800-meter target. That's the one I'd like to try." The Marines exchanged glances. Now the joke was getting better. The old man wanted to attempt the impossible shot with a worn-out rifle. The sergeant decided to let it play out. "Sure thing, sir. But just so you know, that distance is beyond the effective range of the M82. We've never had anyone hit it in training. It's there for educational purposes, to show the limits." Robert nodded. "I understand. May I have 3 rounds?" The sergeant handed over 3 cartridges, suppressing a smile. Robert settled into a prone position behind the Barrett. His movements were slow but precise. He didn't rush. He loaded 1 round, closed the bolt, then lay completely still for several minutes. The Marines watching began to get restless. "Sir, if you're not comfortable taking the shot." Robert spoke without moving. "I'm reading the wind. Please don't interrupt." His voice was gentle, but carried an authority that silenced the comment. Another minute passed. Robert's breathing slowed to an almost meditative rhythm. The Marines closer to him noticed something odd. Despite his age, despite the difficulty of holding steady behind the massive rifle, Robert showed no tremor, no strain. He was perfectly stable, as if he and the rifle had merged into a single solid object. The first shot surprised everyone. The report from the .50 caliber was massive, rolling across the range like thunder. Downrange, 3,800 meters away, the steel target sang. The distinctive ring of a hit echoed back several seconds later. The Marines froze. The sergeant grabbed his spotting scope, confirming what his ears had told him. Dead center impact. Impossible. The old man had just made a shot that Marine Scout snipers considered beyond the weapon's effective capability, with a supposedly worn-out rifle, on the first try. "Sir, that was... how did you..." Robert calmly ejected the spent casing, loaded the second round. "The rifle's not broken, it's just old, and old things, properly understood, can still perform." He fired the second round. Another perfect hit, the steel target ringing clear across the distance. The Marines weren't laughing anymore. They crowded around the spotting scopes, confirming what seemed impossible. 2 rounds, 2 hits, at a distance where experienced snipers struggled to even get rounds on target. Robert loaded the third cartridge. This time he adjusted his aim slightly, compensating for a shift in wind conditions that none of the Marines had detected. The third shot rang steel again, completing what no one at this range had ever witnessed. 3 consecutive hits at 3,800 meters with iron sights and minimal preparation. Robert safed the rifle, stood slowly, and handed it back to the sergeant. "She's not broken. She's a fine weapon. Treat her with respect and she'll serve you well." The sergeant's hands trembled as he accepted the rifle. "Sir, who are you? That's not possible. Nobody shoots like that. Not at that distance. Not with this rifle." Robert started to deflect, but one of the younger Marines had approached his windbreaker, which Robert had removed before shooting. The Marine saw what Robert had tried to keep private. A patch inside the jacket. Faded but legible. The Marine read it aloud, his voice filled with growing awe. "United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper School, Chief Instructor, 1967 through 1989, Distinguished Marksman Medal, Vietnam Service, 3 tours." The sergeant's face went pale. You were the chief instructor for 22 years. Robert nodded quietly. "Started as a scout sniper in 1965. Deployed to Vietnam in 1966. 3 combat tours. Confirmed. Well, the number doesn't matter now. Came back and they asked me to train the next generation. Taught at the Scout Sniper School until I retired in 1989. Trained about 1,800 Marines total. Some of them probably trained your instructors." The sergeant was processing this information with visible difficulty. "Sir, the record shot from this range is 3,200 meters. Set in 2019 by one of our best instructors, using modern equipment and computer-aided ballistics. You just hit 3,800 meters. 3 times. With a rifle we thought was worn out. With iron sights. How is that possible?" Robert smiled gently. "Son, that rifle is from my era. I helped write the training manual for the M82 when it was first introduced to the Marine Corps. I fired thousands of rounds through weapons exactly like this one. I know how it performs, how to compensate for barrel wear, how to read conditions without computers. The shot's not impossible. It's just difficult, and difficulty is overcome by experience, patience, and understanding your weapon." He paused, then added, "You called it broken because the digital diagnostic tools suggested the barrel was beyond service life. But those tools measure only certain variables. They don't account for the consistency that comes from a properly seasoned barrel. This rifle has thousands of rounds through it, but those rounds have created a bore that's predictable. It's not degraded. It's refined. The senior instructor at the range had been called over by this point. He was a gunnery sergeant with 15 years of experience, himself a highly skilled marksman. He'd heard the commotion and seen the impossible shot confirmations. Now he stood before Robert with an expression mixing shock and reverence. "Master Sergeant Robert Thompson." "Sir, I know that name. You're in our institutional history. You set multiple Marine Corps marksmanship records that stood for decades. You pioneered techniques for extreme long-range shooting that became doctrine. Sir, I studied your methods at Scout Sniper School. They told us you were the best long-range shooter the Corps ever produced." Robert looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I was one of many talented Marines, Gunny. The Corps has always had excellent marksmen." The gunnery sergeant shook his head. "Sir, with respect, you're being too modest. Your verified combat shot in Vietnam in 1968, 2,700 meters with an M40 rifle, a weapon with an effective range of 800 meters. That record stood for 38 years. You made shots that people thought were impossible. Then you taught others how to do the same. And we just watched you do it again at 79 years old, with a rifle we'd written off as scrap. Sir, this is..." He struggled for words. "This is like watching a legend come to life." Robert's response was quiet, but firm. "Legends aren't real, Gunny. I'm just a Marine who spent a lifetime studying marksmanship. The principles don't change. The fundamentals don't change. Technology helps, but it doesn't replace understanding." The gunnery sergeant made an immediate decision. "Sir, would you be willing to stay and talk to the students? We have 30 Scout Sniper candidates here this week. They need to hear this. They need to learn from this. Most of them have grown up with digital everything. They trust computers more than their own skills. You just demonstrated that fundamental marksmanship, the kind you can't download or compute. That's what separates good shooters from legendary ones." Robert hesitated. "Gunny, I'm sure your instruction is excellent. These young Marines don't need an old man." The gunnery sergeant interrupted. "Sir, they need exactly what you just demonstrated. They need to understand that marksmanship is more than equipment and apps. Please." For the next 4 hours, Robert shared knowledge that transformed how the students understood their craft. He explained how to read mirage and wind without instruments, trusting observation over technology. He demonstrated breathing techniques that created stability without mechanical aids. He discussed the mental discipline required for extreme-range shots, the patience to wait hours for conditions to align, the confidence to execute when the moment arrived. He told stories from Vietnam, not glorifying combat, but explaining technical challenges. How to estimate range when laser rangefinders didn't exist. How to compensate for environmental conditions with no weather data. How to make shots that doctrine said were impossible because the mission demanded it. The students absorbed everything, realizing they were learning from someone who'd lived the evolution of modern snipercraft. But Robert's most important lesson transcended shooting. "You have tools I never had," he told them. "Better rifles, better optics, better ammunition, ballistic computers, laser rangefinders, weather stations. All of that is excellent. Use every advantage available. But don't become dependent on technology to the point where you're helpless without it. Master the fundamentals so completely that you could make the shot with the most basic equipment. Understand your rifle at such a deep level that you know what it will do before you pull the trigger. That's the difference between being a technician who operates equipment and being a marksman who makes impossible shots possible." The gunnery sergeant asked what every Marine was thinking. "Sir, why didn't you come forward before? Why didn't you tell us who you were? We run this training constantly. Your expertise could have been teaching Marines for years." Robert's answer reflected both humility and sadness. "Because I'm 79 years old, Gunny. Because I assumed my methods were obsolete, replaced by better technology and modern techniques. because I thought I'd be that annoying old veteran telling stories nobody wanted to hear. I was happy just watching, seeing that the Corps still produces excellent Marines. I didn't think my knowledge was still relevant. The gunnery sergeant's response was immediate and emotional. "Sir, everything you demonstrated today is relevant. Everything you taught us this afternoon is essential. Please don't assume age equals obsolescence. The Corps needs you." Within days, Robert found himself recalled to service in an unexpected way. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper School formally invited him to serve as a master instructor and historical consultant. He would teach courses on fundamental marksmanship without technological aids, mentor students struggling with the mental aspects of precision shooting, and help develop curriculum that balanced modern technology with timeless fundamentals. Robert protested that he was too old, that he couldn't keep up with young Marines physically. The school commandant was unmoved. "Master Sergeant, we're not asking you to run obstacle courses. We're asking you to teach marksmanship at a level that nobody currently on staff can match. Your physical limitations are irrelevant to that mission." Robert accepted, returning to the school where he'd taught decades earlier. The young Marines called him Top out of respect, using the traditional term for a senior enlisted Marine. He corrected them gently, reminding them he was retired, but they persisted. To them, he embodied everything a top-tier Marine marksman should be: humble, competent, dedicated, and impossibly skilled. Robert taught them that technology was a tool, not a crutch, that computers could calculate, but only experience could judge, that the best shot wasn't always the most complex, but rather the most carefully executed, that patience mattered more than equipment. His students achieved marksmanship scores that exceeded previous class averages by significant margins. The Barrett M82 that Robert had used for his demonstration was removed from the parts inventory and returned to service. The gunnery sergeant personally supervised its restoration, ensuring it received the careful maintenance it deserved. The rifle was redesignated as a training weapon specifically for teaching fundamental marksmanship without digital aids. Students learned to shoot it using only iron sights, wind observation, and mathematical calculation. Many struggled initially, accustomed to having computers do the complex ballistic calculations. But as they mastered the fundamentals, their overall marksmanship improved dramatically. They learned to trust their skills, not just their equipment. The rifle became known as Top's Barrett, maintained with special care and used only for the most challenging training exercises. Years later, when Robert finally passed away at 86, the Marine Corps gave him a funeral with full honors. Scout snipers from across the Corps attended, including dozens of men he'd trained in the 1970s and 1980s, now elderly themselves, but standing proudly in formation. The current commandant of the Scout Sniper School delivered the eulogy. "Master Sergeant Thompson taught thousands of Marines to shoot," he said. "But more importantly, he taught us to think, to see, to understand our craft at a level that transcends technology. He showed us that skill doesn't diminish with age, that experience creates knowledge computers can't replicate, and that true mastery is timeless." Every Marine who makes a difficult shot, who trusts fundamentals over technology, who perseveres through difficult conditions, carries forward his legacy. The 3,800-meter target where Robert made his impossible shots still stands at the Quantico range. A plaque commemorates the day a 79-year-old man, dismissed as irrelevant and handed a broken rifle, demonstrated marksmanship that active-duty experts couldn't match. The plaque reads, "Master Sergeant Robert Thompson, USMC retired. 3 shots, 3,800 meters, age 79. Proof that mastery has no expiration date." Every Scout Sniper candidate visits that target during training, hearing the story of the old man and the broken rifle. They learn the lesson that arrogance blinds you to wisdom, that assumptions about age or equipment can be catastrophically wrong, and that the greatest experts are often the quietest people in the room. If you believe that true mastery transcends age and technology, that experience creates capability no computer can match, and that we should listen to those who've perfected their craft over decades, subscribe to this channel. We honor the stories of men and women whose skills remind us that excellence is timeless, that wisdom comes from patient dedication, and that the people we dismiss might be exactly the teachers we need. Share Robert's story with someone who's ever been told they're too old or that their methods are outdated. Comment about times when experience proved superior to technology, when age brought capability rather than limitation. These stories teach us to respect mastery wherever we find it, to value fundamentals over flashy tools, and to never underestimate the quiet competence of those who've walked the path before us.